There's a document that takes about 5 minutes to pull up, and for a huge number of people over 65, opening it is the difference between the check you're getting and the check you're supposed to be getting. I'm not talking about a one-time payment or a refund. I'm talking about a permanently larger monthly deposit, the same higher number landing in your account every month for the rest of your life. And the frustrating part is that most people who are missing this money aren't missing it because they don't qualify. They're missing it because nobody ever pointed them to this document, and nobody ever told them the one specific line inside it that actually matters. Here's the part almost nobody explains, and it's the part you need to hold on to. Simply opening the document does nothing by itself. What raises your check is knowing exactly what to look for once it's in front of you. Skim past that one line and you can walk away from money that was already yours. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly what this document is, exactly where to find it, and exactly what to look for inside it that can put more money in your pocket every single month. I'll also show you the errors that quietly shrink checks by the millions, who's most likely to be sitting on one of those errors right now without knowing it, and the exact form that gets it corrected. Stick around to the end because after we cover the correction process, I'm going to give you several additional ways to legitimately increase your benefit, and at least one of them applies to nearly everyone watching this. This is your money. By the time we're done here, you'll know precisely how to claim it. What this document actually is. Let's start here, because once this clicks, everything else falls into place. The document is your Social Security statement. It's completely free, and it lives inside a free account called My Social Security on the official government site, ssa.gov. If you've never created one, it takes roughly 5 minutes. Once you're logged in, your statement is sitting right there. Inside that statement is something the overwhelming majority of people have genuinely never looked at: your complete year-by-year earnings history. Every year you've worked and paid into Social Security, going all the way back to your very first paycheck as a teenager, each one listed with a dollar figure next to it. Here's why that list matters so much. Most people assume Social Security bases your check on your final few years of work, or on some simple lifetime average. That's not how the formula works. The Social Security Administration takes your 35 highest earning years, adjusts each one for inflation, a process the agency calls indexing, averages those 35 adjusted years together, and runs that average through a benefit formula to arrive at your monthly payment. That 35-year average is, without exaggeration, the single most important number in your entire retirement calculation. Every dollar of your check traces back to it. Now picture this. One of those 35 years, a year you worked full-time, earned solid pay, shows up on your record as a 0, or as half of what you actually made. That understated number gets folded into the average along with the other 34 years, and it drags the whole average down. Since your check is a direct function of that average, one bad year silently reduces every check you'll ever receive for the rest of your life. It's a bit like one wrong grade dragging down a lifetime GPA, except this GPA determines your income in retirement. That's exactly why people who catch and fix even a single wrong year often see a meaningful jump in their benefit. They aren't getting a bonus. They're finally getting the check they should have had all along. And here's the catch. The only place you can actually see the raw, year-by-year numbers behind that average, the real figures the formula is built on, is inside that statement. Your check is calculated from this data, but you're never shown it unless you go looking. The single most important number in your retirement is built from data nobody hands you and nobody ever asks you to confirm. Why just looking at it can lead to a bigger check? So why does opening this document lead to real money for so many people? Because every one of those year-by-year figures originated from payroll reports that employers filed on your behalf, decades worth of filings from every job you ever held. And employer-reported data is not error-proof. A digit gets transposed. An amount gets recorded far below what you actually earned. A year you know you worked shows up as a flat 0. Each one of those mistakes pulls your 35-year average down, and since your check is calculated directly from that average, the number you're living on ends up smaller than it should be. This isn't a rounding error either. Based on how the benefit formula weights each of your 35 years, a single incorrect or missing year can realistically lower a monthly benefit by roughly $100. Stretch that out, and it's about $1,200 a year, gone. Over a 20-year retirement, one uncorrected year can cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $24,000 in benefits you were entitled to but never received. And if there are 2 or 3 flawed years sitting on your record, which happens more often than you'd think, that number multiplies. Here's the part that should genuinely frustrate you. The Social Security Administration does not proactively catch these errors for you. There's no automatic audit of your file, no alert, no letter that says, "This looks off, you might want to check it." The earnings data goes in, your benefit gets calculated from it, and unless you personally sit down, open the statement, and compare it against your own memory and paperwork, that error just sits there, quietly shrinking your check, year after year. The money doesn't come find you, you have to go find it. Who's most likely to have an error sitting on their record? You might be wondering whether this actually applies to you. Based on the patterns I've seen repeatedly across client files, here's who tends to be carrying an error right now, often without any idea it's there. First, anyone who worked for a small business, particularly back in the 1980s and 1990s. Payroll in that era was frequently handled by hand, sometimes literally on paper ledgers by a business owner with no dedicated payroll software. Manual entry means manual mistakes, and small shop, family business, and local company jobs from that period are exactly the kind of records where errors tend to cluster. Second, anyone who's ever been self-employed, freelancers, independent contractors, small business owners who paid self-employment tax. The reporting process for self-employment income leaves more room for a year to be recorded incorrectly or to be missing from the record altogether. If you worked for yourself at any point, even briefly, those years deserve a close look. Third, anyone who changed jobs frequently. Every new employer represented a fresh opportunity for a payroll clerk to mistype a Social Security number or misreport an earnings figure, sending your wages into the wrong file or losing them entirely. The more employers over a career, the more chances something slipped through. Fourth, and this one is both common and frequently overlooked, women who changed their last name after marriage or divorce without the new name being fully updated with the Social Security Administration. If the name an employer reported doesn't match the name on file with SSA, those earnings can fail to link to your record at all. They don't disappear from the system, they just sit there, unattached to anyone, while your official earnings history understates what you actually made. If you've changed your name at any point, this is one of the highest value things you can check. The 0-year opportunity. There's one more feature of this statement that surprises people, and it can be worth real money. If you have fewer than 35 years of recorded earnings, common for people who took time off to raise children, return to school, care for a parent, or who worked in a job not covered by Social Security, the formula still needs 35 years to run its calculation. So it fills every missing year with a 0. Each of those zeros gets averaged in and drags your benefit down hard. But here's the opportunity. Sometimes those empty years aren't actually empty. Sometimes you were working and the earnings simply never made it onto your record correctly. Finding and correcting even one real year that's currently showing as a 0 can add somewhere in the range of $50 to $150 a month to your check, according to typical case outcomes reported by benefits counselors. Correct 2 or 3, and you're looking at a meaningful, permanent raise. 2 stories that make this real. Numbers on a page don't always land the way a real example does, so let me walk you through 2 situations I've seen play out. The first is a man I'll call Harold. In the late 1990s, Harold spent 3 years working for a small construction company. Solid pay, full-time hours, honest work. Decades later, right before he retired, someone finally told him to pull his Social Security statement and actually read through it line by line. When he did, he noticed those 3 construction years were recorded at roughly 60% of what he'd actually been paid. It turned out the owner had run payroll by hand and had been submitting understated figures year after year. Harold had no idea. He tracked down whatever old paperwork he still had, filed a correction, and his monthly check increased by more than $300 for the rest of his life. That money had been sitting unclaimed on his record for nearly 3 decades. The only thing that changed was that one afternoon he finally looked. The second story is the one that worries me most, because I suspect it's the most common. I'll call her Eleanor. Eleanor married young, took her husband's last name, and worked under that name for almost 15 years. Later in life, she divorced and changed her name again, continuing to work without giving it a second thought. Decades later, when she finally reviewed her statement, she found a stretch of years in the middle of her career showing far less income than she remembered, with a couple of years nearly blank. The cause was straightforward but costly. During her name changes, some of her earnings had been reported under a name that no longer matched her Social Security file, so those wages never attached to her record. Real work, real paychecks, just floating in the system, uncredited, for over 20 years. Once she gathered her old tax returns and filed the correction, her benefit rose meaningfully for the remainder of her life. If you're a woman who has changed your name even once, this section is written for you specifically. It's worth checking, and you may be owed more than you'd expect. Beyond fixing errors, other legitimate ways to raise your check. Correcting a mistake is the single biggest opportunity for many people, but not everyone has an error sitting on their record. So here are several additional, completely legitimate ways to increase what you receive, because the underlying principle is simple. You should get credit for every dollar you actually earned. The first applies to almost everyone and connects directly back to those zero-filled years. If your record still has zeros among your top 35 years, working additional years, even part-time, even later in life, can replace one of those zeros with a real positive number. Since the formula only counts your 35 highest years, one more solid earning year can bump a zero, or a very low early career year, out of the calculation entirely and lift your average. Second, timing matters enormously, and your statement lays out the numbers for you. If you haven't started collecting yet, each year you delay past your full retirement age adds roughly 8% to your eventual benefit, all the way up to age 70, a guaranteed increase confirmed by SSA's own delayed retirement credit rules, and one you genuinely cannot replicate through any private investment with that little risk. Your statement shows the actual dollar estimates for claiming at different ages, so you can see precisely what waiting is worth in your specific case. Third, if you're married, divorced after a marriage that lasted at least 10 years, or widowed, you may be entitled to a benefit larger than the one calculated purely from your own earnings record. A spouse can potentially claim up to half of the higher earning spouse's benefit amount, and a surviving spouse generally keeps the larger of the two benefits rather than losing access to the higher one. Many people never realize this applies to them and simply assume the benefit tied to their own work history is the only option available. Every one of these is a legitimate path to a larger check, and every one of them starts the same way, opening the document and actually reading what it's telling you. The step-by-step process. Here's exactly what to do. Before you even open the statement, gather anything that documents what you actually earned over the years. Old W-2 forms, tax returns, pay stubs, or even a clear, specific memory of which years you worked which jobs. Put it all in one folder before you sit down. The more documentation you have, the stronger your case. And if there's a box of old financial papers in a closet you've been meaning to throw out, hold off until after you've done this. It could be worth real money. Step 1. Go to ssa.gov and create your free My Social Security account if you don't already have one. It takes about 5 minutes. Use only the official site. Never click an ad or a third-party link promising to do this for you. Step 2. Open your statement and locate the earnings history section. You'll see every year going back to your first job, each with a dollar figure attached. Step 3. This is the step that actually matters. Compare those figures year by year against whatever records you've gathered. You're looking for 3 things: years where the recorded amount is clearly lower than what you actually earned, years showing a 0 when you know you were working, and years missing from the list entirely. Move slowly and pay special attention to your highest earning years, since those carry the most weight in your 35-year average. An error in a high-earning year costs you far more than an error in a low one. Step 4. If you find a discrepancy, the form you need is the Request for Correction of Earnings Record, officially SSA Form SSA 7008, available directly from the Social Security Administration. You'll submit it along with documentation supporting what you actually earned, with old W-2 forms serving as your strongest evidence. And here's something most people don't know. Even if you no longer have your old paperwork, the SSA can pull copies of your W-2 forms going back to 1978 for free when the purpose is correcting your earnings record. A missing shoebox of old tax documents is not a reason to walk away from this. Step 5. Be patient but persistent. Corrections are commonly processed within about 10 to 90 days, after which your benefit is recalculated and the corrected amount reflects in future payments. Officially, the SSA gives you a window of 3 years, 3 months, and 15 days from the end of the year in which the earnings occurred to get an easy, straightforward correction. But don't let that deadline discourage you from pursuing an older error. The SSA does allow corrections outside that window when you can provide sufficient documentation, such as W-2s, tax returns, or other wage evidence, even for errors 10, 20, or 30 years old. Never assume something is too old to fix. If you have proof, it's worth filing. If you're not comfortable online, if all of this sounds intimidating because you're not confident navigating a website, you don't have to do it alone. And you don't have to do it online at all. You can call the Social Security Administration's national line at 1-800-772-1213 and ask them to mail you a copy of your earnings statement and walk you through your record over the phone. You can also visit your local Social Security office in person and sit down with a staff member who can pull it up with you. Or, if you have a son, daughter, grandchild, or friend who's comfortable with computers, this is a perfect afternoon project to tackle together. There's no shame in asking for help. The only real mistake is leaving the money on the table because the process felt intimidating. The benefit is yours either way, and there's always a path to it. A word of caution. One important warning. Whenever there's money owed to seniors, someone eventually shows up trying to take a cut of it. You never need to pay anyone to check or correct your earnings record. Not a flat fee, not a percentage, nothing. This process is entirely free and handled directly through the Social Security Administration. If you ever see an ad or receive a call from a company offering to recover your Social Security money for a fee, hang up. They're simply performing the same free steps outlined here and keeping a portion of your own money for themselves. The only website you need is the official ssa.gov, and if you want assistance, turn to a trusted family member or a legitimate, no-commission financial advisor. Bringing it together. Your Social Security check is built entirely on decades of earnings data. If even one line in that data is wrong, your check is smaller than it should be, and it stays that way indefinitely until someone finds the error and fixes it. Nobody else is going to do this for you. But the document that lets you check it yourself is free, sitting in your account right now and about 5 minutes away. So today, take the afternoon. Go to ssa.gov, open your statement, read through your earnings history line by line, and if something doesn't match what you know you earned, file the correction. That's the entire process, and it's how a free government document turns into a permanently larger check. If this was useful, share it with someone you care about who's on Social Security or getting close to it, especially anyone who was ever self-employed, worked for a small business, or has changed their name. They're the people most likely to be owed this money, and least likely to know it. The government isn't going to make that call for them, but you can. And while you're at it, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.